to the Solar Panel, the Phoenix Sun Show.
Hey, and welcome to the show, folks. Thank you for coming in. I appreciate you guys. This is early on a Saturday. I understand nobody gets up this early. Well, some of us do, and you see three of them right here on the screen. I appreciate you guys joining us this morning. You'll see we got, as always, my co-host Zona Hoops. Good morning, Zona.
Good morning.
Okay. Don't add anything else.
I was going to let you introduce the guest. So
yeah, and you guys might notice this young man to our left. Actually, if we were sitting on a stage, he would be to our left. Bob Young, welcome to the show, Bob.
Good to be here.
Thank you for coming on. Bob has been around for a very long time. You guys have probably recognized his name from print. But he is a guy who's been around the Suns scene since all the way back to the Barkley and Cotton Fitzsimmons days and all that. When did you start Bob was the beat writer for the Phoenix Suns for the Arizona Republic? When did you start working for the Republic?
Well, I started at the Republic in, believe it or not, my first byline was in October of 1979.
1979.
Yeah, I was 20 years old. And so I worked there for 36 years and spent 12 and a half, I think it was, roughly on the Suns as a beat writer. I covered some Suns stuff before that when they were at the Madhouse on McDowell, mostly sidebar stuff or just filling in type of things. I was on the playoff coverage for a couple of years and stuff before I actually was on the beat. So My first year on the beat was the Charles Barkley arrival, which is, and I came on to that. I've been covering, I've been covering the University of Arizona basketball up to that point for a few years. With the last team one of the teams I covered there was the Steve Kerr, Sean Elliott Final Four team. So. You had in the locker room, you had all those, you had Kerr and Elliott and Tom Tolbert, who you guys may know is a talk radio guy in the Bay Area now. And then I went to the Suns with Charles and Kevin Johnson and guys like that. I was like, man, this is easy. It was like I had quotes coming at me from everywhere for, years. I had no idea that it was hard to do that stuff. Couldn't have been better teams to cover as far as, being a media guy.
Absolutely. So Bob's been around. He's still around the scene. In fact, after stopping covering the beat, I mean, Bob was working through the Arizona Republic on Sunday Heat Index articles for many years after you stopped on the beat, and then even came back for a couple of years working for the Athletic when the Athletic had the funds or decided to spend the funds on covering the Arizona sports. And that was when Gina Mizell, Bob Young, and was it CJ Holmes?
Yes.
Were covering local sports, plus a bunch of other guys like Doug Haller and all that. But those three covered the Suns on a regular basis. And now the pandemic hits and the Athletic kind of cuts down their spending. And suddenly we have a good team again. And the Athletic isn't even covering the region.
Brilliant timing, but they got the Diamondbacks covered.
Jeez. Yeah, really, they're covering the Diamondbacks, but not the Suns.
They missed the bubble run, the finals run, all that stuff. So great timing on their part.
Yeah, hard to believe that they went that. And the other, the other team they quit covering, which I don't get at all, is the Cardinals. The NFL rules on just about every media platform there is, and so that was also ill-timed. I mean, look at them.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. The Cardinals are 6-0. The Suns are 6-0 against the Lakers in the past 3 months or 4 months. I mean,
and that's all that matters,
I have a question.
Right? Those are the only games that really count.
Those are the only ones that matter. It's funny. The Lakers are 0-11 since the Andre Drummond kind of mocked Jay Crowder getting posted up by LeBron James.
The post up, the mock post up.
And the Lakers are 0-11. 6 of those losses are against the Suns. Isn't that beautiful?
That's yeah. Well, what'll happen. You can say that, but Laker fans, they'll just start pointing at the rings, and hard to win that argument with the Suns.
Well, they have to point at something because all summer they said if only Anthony Davis were healthy, we'd wax the Suns.
Yeah.
Now Anthony Davis is healthy, and the Suns still waxed him. So now it's what, Kendrick Nunn is injured, so that was the reason they lost last night. I'm not quite sure.
Yeah. Well, the Nuggets, the Nuggets story was that Jamal Murray was hurt, and they looked pretty good without Jamal Murray the other night. So,
yeah, I think the Suns, I don't know. So let's do that. Let's recap these last two games. But first let's recap the games, and then I want to talk to Bob a little bit about history with the Lakers, starting with a quote by Bill Simmons recently. But first of all, let's just get caught up. We're back in 2021 here, new season. 21-22 season, 2 games in. The Suns get to play 2 of the teams they beat in the playoffs. Wednesday night, they had a 57-41 lead late in the second quarter with 1 minute and 47 seconds left, or 1 minute 27 left or something. And then all of a sudden they crapped the bed. The Suns decided to stop making any shots. What were you guys' takeaways from Wednesday's game? Zona, let's start with you.
Yeah, I think they just got too complacent once they're up 16, and the way they closed the half out was terrible. And I think that just kind of carried over to the second half. So you're playing a Denver team that obviously wanted the revenge, after the playoff series. So I think the motivation was on Denver's side for sure, and the Suns just got too happy on the farm, as Monty would say. But yeah, that was a rough one. I thought, we kind of kept looking for them to make that patented Suns run, and they just never did. So yeah, the execution was just poor. They didn't look like themselves, and it was good to see them bounce back against the Lakers because that looked like the Suns that we all know. So yeah, a little bit rough there. What
do you think, Bob?
I thought they seemed a little low energy. I was kind of surprised by that. A lot of people were, talking about how loud the crowd was, and I saw that it wasn't a sellout, by the way, which I thought was really surprising.
That was disappointing.
Yeah, I mean that's shocking because even in years when they've been not very good, which as you know was a long time recently, they still had. Usually they sell out the home opener. It's just usually happens. I was really surprised by that. Probably a pandemic thing, but they just didn't seem to. The crowd had energy. It seemed. I was watching on TV. It seemed like they had.
I was there.
Energy.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the team didn't. And Devin Booker looked kind of low energy to me.
Yeah.
I think I agree. I think complacency was part of it. I think they just swept this team in the playoffs. They built the big early lead. It seemed like they were trying to feed DeAndre to kind of, make him happy a little bit after all that's gone on, and kind of got out of what they are. And, then once they took the foot off the gas, then it was too late. They were never able to regain that momentum again. I just think they thought, they were going to coast to a win, kind of like, it almost happened again last night. I mean, they had a 32-point cushion, but they, allowed the Lakers to at least make it interesting, which is a little bit concerning.
Yeah, well, I'm not as concerned about that. Well, let's not get to the Friday game yet because I want to go about that one for a little while. Let's first eat our
simmer.
Yeah, let's first wallow in the loss to the Nuggets for a second. That the Suns got up 57-41. They looked like they knew what they were doing. They looked like they had the game in hand. The crowd was into it, Bob. As you mentioned, it was not a sellout, but it was close to a sellout. It was 16,000 out of 18,000. It felt pretty much like a sellout. You could see some empty seats, but it was mostly there. And the crowd was into it. I feel like it wasn't a sellout because we're only 2 months since the finals. That's what I feel like. It was like such a short off season. People are not used to the turnaround. I mean, and I feel like the team wasn't ready for the turnaround. I feel like the team they got in there. They were playing the Nuggets. This is totally uneducated thought here. Team got in there. They were used to the pressure of 2 straight months of playoff games. Had every game mattered, every second mattered, every moment mattered. They get in there, they take a big lead against the Nuggets, the team they just swept in the playoffs, and I think they just decide, you know what, this isn't as scary as the playoffs were, and I'm kind of losing my focus here. And then the Suns just couldn't get it back in the second half. That's what I felt. And then on the other hand, the Nuggets were desperate for the win. The Nuggets really wanted to know that they could beat the Suns and show that, and that combined to make it a really disappointing opener. The Suns had won 3 straight openers and now dropped this one. I looked back at prior teams that had unexpected runs. I mean, I didn't look very far, but basically the Suns did have a tendency back in the day to lose a home opener after a long run in the playoffs. And I think some of it just might be refocusing on regular season is a little bit lower intensity, but you still have to be intense to win the games.
I think that's pretty much on the money. And I think Jokic in particular was really motivated. I mean, he was the league MVP and they got swept, and DeAndre played great in that series. So I think he was especially motivated to maybe, get a little bit of a payback there.
And he was making his moon shots, man.
Yeah.
What do they call? They have a name for the arc on his shots. I forget I don't know. It's something.
It should be something mile high.
Yeah. They have some kind of combination Croatian, Serbian. I forget where he's from. Sorry, Nicola. But some kind of name for his moon shots. But he was making every one of them, and good for him. And there was I think Rafael Torres, who is a person who follows the Nuggets, a media person who follows the Nuggets. Maybe it was him, or he retweeted it. But there was a minute and a half of it was titled "Jokic working Ayton" in that game, and every one of the shots except for the one where Jokic drove into Ayton's body and made the layup in the first quarter, the first points I think Jokic had. Everything else was Jokic's turnaround moonshot fadeaways, and I'm like, you know what? Ayton's going to give that up. If Jokic is going to hit a turnaround in the paint, fall backwards or run, lean backwards, moonshot, good. That's why he's the MVP. That's what makes him an MVP.
It's unguardable.
Yeah, you can't guard him. You can't stop him from getting that shot. So you just have to challenge it and hope he misses it. He didn't.
What do you think, Zona, about how Ayton looked in that game?
I thought he looked fine. Like you said, that shot's just, you can't guard it, and it's going to happen. Like in the NBA in general, I think that's why defense is such an interesting and subjective discussion, because like you could play perfect defense and they hit like a crazy shot, and that's why the numbers lie sometimes. And on the contrary, you could play terrible defense and the opponent just misses a shot. So I thought he looked fine. Obviously, they went to him early and kind of stopped. I think in general, their offense just looked really. They just looked uncomfortable out there, especially once Denver punched back. So, I think in the long run, it'll be good for them, just a wake-up call, for them to realize they can't coast through these games, and they have a target on their back now. It just comes with the territory of making a finals run. So that's an adjustment they'll have to make as well, because they're still a young team and they're not used to having that pressure of like, usually they're the guys that get up for an upset, but now they're the team that, especially against younger teams, they're going to come hard after them. So that's going to be something to monitor.
Yep. So actually I wrote something on Thursday after Wednesday night's opener, and the whole thing was the starters did not look ready to play in a regular season game. As a group, they lacked energy. Obviously Devin Booker, 3 out of 15. He made 3 out of 15 shots. And inside the arc, he was 1 for 8. I mean, that was bad on Wednesday night. Jay Crowder missed all 5 of his shots, which were all threes, of course. Mikal Bridges, he made about half of his shots, but it seemed like he should have made a few more. Chris Paul was kind of a non-factor, and Devin Booker was terrible. And then we go to Friday night against the Lakers. And it's like, that's when in between games, they all decided that they had not shown up well enough in that first game. They go on the road to LA and they blow out the Lakers. So Zona, let's start with you. What was your impression of the Suns against the Lakers, and what really turned the tide in that game?
I think the loss to Denver just kind of woke them up, honestly. And, they showed more sense of urgency and just looked like the Suns that we know, especially offensively. And when Chris Paul starts dancing with the ball and hitting these like tough fadeaways, it's over for the other team.
Over AD.
Yeah, those are crazy shots. And when you got the Lakers fighting amongst themselves too, that's just adds to the fuel. So Davis and Dwight going at each other,
Mhm.
that was pretty funny. I think maybe the top 75 list like might have factored into that because they're both, all the beef in that. But yeah, it just looked like the Suns that we know, and I would expect nothing less from this team, especially with Monty Williams running it. Like they know that they need to show consistent effort, because if they don't, the Denver game is going to happen over and over. They even blew a pretty substantial lead against the Bucks in the finals too. So if you guys remember that, I think it was 16 or 17 points. So yeah, I think that's something they need to kind of work on, is just not letting those, big leads, slowly get taken away from them.
Yeah, if you're talking about after they took the 32-point lead in the third, and then it got down to 10 or 12, actually 9 at one point, I just felt like the Suns lost their. I mean, they had already had the game won. Bob, what do you think on Friday?
No, I think that's true. And you see that a lot in, the beauty of the NBA is that 24-second shot clock. And so, teams can make a big comeback. And, if you relax a little bit, they can close the gap. But that they knew that gap was too wide for the Lakers to bring it home. And, I think they, even when they cut it to 9, you could see that the Suns kind of picked it up just a notch, just enough to get, to get it done. So I'm not too terribly concerned about that, other than there's a pattern of them, taking the foot off the gas. But I'll tell you, I've always thought, through the years, the best teams are the best road teams. It's just always that way. There's certain teams that have a great home court advantage. Denver's one of those teams because of the altitude. Utah, people don't talk about the elevation there as much, but very similar, great crowds. Those are tough places to play, so they're going to rack up, a huge number of wins. But the really good teams are the teams that have that edge on the road. And the Suns last season were about as good as I can remember a Suns team being on the road. I mean, even going back to the Barkley years, they were really good on the road. But that team was just really, really solid on the road, and they looked just exactly like that again last night against the Lakers. So, yeah, that was to me, the Denver game. I don't want to rehash it, but I think they were trying to get DeAndre going and just kind of got out of sorts from what they want to do, and then it was working early, and then they just kind of relaxed. So, I think that Laker game was a better indication of what we're going to see from them, and if they're going to play like that on the road against a good team, I'm not too concerned about them.
Yeah, that's a good point about the road games, because they're, I think, 24-12 last year, which is the best in the NBA by at least a couple games. So, if they can continue that, then they're in great shape. Yeah,
that's just always been the measure of a really good team. And you could even see it early last season. They were just a terrific team on the road, very solid.
Yeah, Code JJM in the comments, we invented teammates fighting on the bench. After the Lakers game, Magic Johnson tweeted, I don't know how the guy is so smart and so clueless at the same time, but Magic Johnson tweeted, in 42 years in the NBA, never seen teammates fight on the bench before. I'm like, I've seen that a lot, actually. And one of those
you see some barking and stuff, but you don't really have – I can't remember
hands on.
Yeah. Then of course, every once in a while you get the player-coach confrontation, like the infamous Robert Horry, Danny Ainge towel. Those kind of things. Yeah,
he never played another game for the Suns.
No, those are always great conversational moments, and I'm sure that's going to be. I couldn't believe, if I'm Dwight Howard, I'm glad to have a job. I can't believe you don't want to mess with AD, and I don't care what the situation is or what happened. And you could see him kind of trying to calm it down almost immediately after he pissed him off. He was kind of trying to pat him on the chest, and didn't look like AD was having it. So, that wasn't a wise move on Dwight's part.
Has Dwight ever been accused of doing wise moves?
Yeah. I don't know. He looked. I think I tweeted this last night to Peter Vesey. He looked browbeaten.
He looked browbeaten. Yeah. No, that's definitely an interesting exchange there. AD, man, I tell you what, doesn't matter what. Okay, so we talk about the Lakers, and you're saying, they're going to be really good. They're going to win a lot of games. I'm not convinced they're going to win a ton of games. I think they'll win more than 500, they'll win more than they lose. I think they're more in danger of the play-in than they are leading the West. That's my hot take. And here's the reasons why. Yes, you've got LeBron James, Anthony Davis, and Russell Westbrook, 3 of arguably the top 15 players in the game when they're playing well. But the problem is Russell Westbrook is not a good fit for the team. LeBron James isn't even trying to drive to the hoop successfully anymore. The Lakers don't get to the hoop at all until the fourth quarter when the Suns were playing their second unit and took their foot off the gas, and it was mostly JaVale McGee in there. The Lakers had almost no points in the paint. And, of course, Frank Vogel's going to complain that it's because the Suns were fouling them on the way in, but there were just as many uncalled fouls on the other end as well. So I think because the Lakers can't get to the hoop and they're not a good shooting team. I mean, they were down 32 points and still made a bunch of threes because LeBron James is uncharacteristically making his threes, and he's not going to do that all year. So I have a lot of worries. If you're a Laker fan, you should have a lot of worries about your team this year. I think they're closer to the play-in than they are the conference finals. What do you think, Zona?
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think the difficult part with them is like they're going to struggle early like any team does when you're like integrating a new like star, if you will, with Westbrook. But their like luxury of like figuring it out is a little bit I don't know how to word this. They're a lot older. We'll just go with that. And they're going to struggle like late in the season to like turn it up a notch, I think, because they're not going to have that gas that, you know, a typical big three could turn it on and, you know, for months of the season dominate. I think they will go on a streak at one point, but it might just be too late for them to really climb up the standings. So I think you're looking at like a, 4 to 6 seed, like in that range. And that's everyone had them as like a 1 or 2 seed. I never really saw that happening. I think Westbrook is a terrible fit. He takes the ball away from LeBron and Davis, which, by all means keep doing that. He can't really shoot. He can't play off the ball. So anytime, you're taking the ball away from 2 of the best players in the world, I'm happy with it as a Suns fan. Lakers fan should not be. So I think that's going to be an interesting storyline to watch. It wouldn't shock me if they wanted him gone by the trade deadline. I don't think they're going to give up on him that soon, but that's my hot take.
Bob, you've been watching LeBron his whole career, obviously. One of the greatest players ever.
I think he might be the last guy in the league that was in the league when I was my last season. I was covering the Suns his rookie year. I think he's the last guy. I haven't looked it up, but I'm guessing he probably is.
So what do you think? Is LeBron just playing possum right now, kind of saving his energy, or do you feel like he's really on the downhill slide? What do you think?
Well, I mean, let's face it, he is an older guy. So, I mean, he has to be. Father Time always wins. I think Charles Barkley used to say that all the time.
All the time is undefeated. Yep.
Yeah. But look, I think he's, I used to see this with Charles. LeBron probably barely picked up a basketball in the offseason. It was a short offseason. He's probably not in, great condition yet. Maybe some of those other guys aren't either. Being an older team, they're going to take a little bit longer. They don't, they're not going to have the fresh legs. Do
you think they would have fresh legs at the beginning?
Well, you would think so, but did the Suns look like they had fresh legs?
No, you're right.
In the first game, sometimes you have a little.
The Lakers had an extra month off, though.
Well, yeah. Why was that? But I'm not. I think the Lakers are going to be, they'll get interested. They'll start getting those guys into, they'll get them integrated. And I do agree that Westbrook isn't necessarily a great fit because anytime you have 2 guys that need the basketball. That was one of the things that I worried about when the Suns got Chris Paul is like, Devin needs the basketball, but I think they found a really good balance last season where, and it took so much pressure off of Devin that they can still give him the ball late in the clock and stuff and let him do his thing if they have to. And, he can get them a bucket when they're in a late clock situation. So can Chris, So I think it turned out to be a blessing for Devin more than a hindrance. But when you look at LeBron, he wants the ball, and Westbrook is not the same player when he doesn't have the ball.
Right.
So it's going to be interesting to see if they can find that balance that Book and CP3 found. I don't know that they'll find it to that degree, but I think the Lakers are going to end up winning 50-some games, and I think they'll be in the top 4 in the West. That's my.
Oh, okay, there's your take.
Yeah,
I'm saying bottom half of the West standings. Yep. You're saying top half.
I'm saying
playoff.
top 4. Yeah,
top 4, top half of the playoff standings. Hey, Code JJM puts in, it's as simple as starting AD at the 5. We've heard this for years. And Laker fans might say, well, in the second half, AD mostly played the 5, and that's when the Lakers came back. But AD was also playing the 5 when the Suns got up 32 as well. And AD hates playing the 5 because he doesn't like the physicality in there. So do you guys think it's as simple as AD playing the 5?
I think that's their best way to play, but he doesn't want to do it. So, I mean, he's not going to do it. That's unless LeBron can convince him that that's what they need to do, and he's willing to sacrifice. But guys like that typically don't want to sacrifice very much. So if he doesn't want to play the 5, my guess is he's not going to play the 5.
Yeah,
which is why they got those centers. Zona, what do you think?
Yeah.
No, I agree. Pelicans fans are like rolling over in their graves right now because this has been going on for years.
I hope.
I mean, they've been wanting him to play the 5 for so long. He just won't do it. So I don't see how that's going to change. He's a star. He has a say in it. So, Vogel could want him to play the 5, but if he's not into it, then I just don't see it happening. I do agree that's their best route, especially when your centers are DeAndre Jordan and Dwight Howard. But, I'm happy with them starting them for the rest of the season if that's what they want to do.
Yeah, I think AD just gets on the injured list faster if he has to play the 5. That's my take on that. He's already on the floor half the game anyway, throwing himself around. All right, so that's those first 2 games. Let's move on to the second quarter of our show. It's a 4-quarter show, as you guys are aware. And we did a long first quarter. There must have been a lot of timeouts. I don't know. But we got a long first quarter done in the books. Let's move on to the second quarter. We're going to take Bob down memory lane. Bob, as we established early in the show, has been around the Suns, very closely linked for the past 30 years. He's been here through most of the Colangelo ownership part, because Colangelo was GM well before that, but Colangelo ownership part and now the Sarver ownership part. You've been an interested party doing the heat index for a while, and then also working for the Athletic. Bob was around and did the reporting, much of the reporting with Paul Coro back when Joe Johnson had an issue with his contract extension and the whole fallout. And we had a lot of misinformation going back and forth, including some of it from me, when DeAndre Ayton's contract extension kind of fell through this week. And people were trying to remember how Joe Johnson went and how Joe Johnson eventually forced his way out of town because of failed negotiations with Bob Sarver. And I want Bob on here. I wanted Bob on here to help us set straight what happened with Joe Johnson and how that may or may not be the same thing that might happen with DeAndre Ayton. So, Bob, can you spend a couple of minutes telling us about Joe, how that unfolded, and then let us know how you think that might or might not be the same with Ayton?
Yeah, well, I do see the similarities with Ayton. And what happened with Joe, Robert bought the team. They signed Nash. Joe was eligible for an extension, and he wanted $50 million for 6 years. I looked this up last night.
This is summer of 2004, right, Bob?
I believe so. Yeah, it was right after Robert bought the team.
Yeah, so summer of 2004.
He wanted 50 for 6. Robert offered 45 for 6. Wouldn't budge off that number. So he basically said, go out, have a great year, and prove that you deserve the money, and we'll give you the contract. So, he did. their first year. They win, with Nash, they win 62 games. He's terrific off the ball. He's terrific giving Nash a break by playing, running the team in long stretches. Got the fracture of his eye. Remember that? And played. Played. So, it was.
I still think that was the reason they lost the conference finals, not because the Spurs were so good.
Right. So they ended up, he ended up doing everything that he could. And they came back and their opening offer was exactly the same that they had offered the year before. Now they upped it to, I believe it was $60 million. I looked it up again, and I believe it was 60 for 6 years. And the Joe Johnson camp was wanting more than that at that point. Well, actually, they had pretty much decided they weren't going to take a Suns offer after the initial 45. Then they came back with a 60, and he was not willing.
Too late.
He was pissed off. So they ended up, allowing him to sign an offer sheet, and they made a lot of noise about, very clear, hey, go get an offer sheet. We're going to match whatever anybody offers him. So they did that because they didn't want anybody to sign him to an offer sheet by saying, well, doesn't matter. We're going to match it. They're trying to scare people off of him. So Atlanta signed him to an offer sheet, front loaded the heck out of it. I want to say it was 70 million or 70 plus.
Back then, let me just set really quick the stage for folks, because we're so used to bigger numbers here.
Yeah.
The max back then, like DeAndre Ayton's max was almost 207 million if he had hit some escalators. Back then, the max was in the 70s.
Yeah, I think
so. The Suns offering 60 was a close to max, but not quite. Suns offering 45 was kind of similar to them giving 90 to Mikal Bridges these days. So. Yeah. Context is important.
Yeah. And the thing is, I mean, the big mistake was not giving him the 50 million the first year. It was a fair contract. They were giving Nash 63. They had just given him 63. Nash, as a matter of fact, went to Robert Sarver and said, you got to sign Joe Johnson. He's our best player. This is a guy who's about to be the MVP of the league. He says he's our best player. Well, they didn't do it. So then when it only got ugly, really ugly, when they came back the next year and lowballed him a second time. And then even though they upped it, it was too late. He was PO'd. So, the bottom line is Atlanta signed to an offer sheet, front loaded it. And the Suns, they said that Joe Johnson told them not to match it, and so they weren't going to match it. They were going to, and it's true that Joe Johnson in his camp said, I don't want you to match it, but they weren't going to match it. They didn't want to match it. Otherwise, they could.
Sarver went on radio and said he wanted to match it.
Yeah, but they didn't. That was their whole story the whole way. It doesn't matter what if anybody signs them to an offer sheet, we're going to match it. And then later they basically blamed it on Joe Johnson. They claimed that he wanted to be the man and all this other stuff. And that was
Suns' narrative. That was false.
That was definitely the narrative that came out. And Joe Johnson loved playing with Nash. Said so then, said so after that. That during all of that, he went and played in Nash's celebrity soccer game in New York along with Sean Marion while all of that was going on. He loved those guys, loved playing. He's called that Canadian guy. Loved that Canadian guy. So, the idea that he wanted to be like the man, that's not true. Plus, if you knew Joe Johnson, he didn't really have the man personality. He didn't want to be necessarily he was happy not to be, doing media every night and that kind of thing. He was okay with it, but it wasn't like something, he wasn't like a magnet for the media. He wasn't a quote machine or a guy that needed the attention, that kind of deal. It It just wasn't true. That's the bottom line. It just wasn't true.
So Sarver ended up souring that relationship just with his negotiating style. And so comparing it to this year, of course, the numbers are totally different, but
right.
the Suns took a hard line on not wanting to offer this. James Jones went to talked with Sam Amick with The Athletic, gave him some detail about what happened. And James Jones' words are that they drew a hard line on that 5th year. They didn't want to do the 5th year. Now, in a rookie extension under the current CBA, a rookie extension, if you give a 5th year, you have to give the max 25%. And their player is eligible for those escalators that can get you up to 30% of the max, 30% of the cap. So the Suns basically drew the line at the 5th year because they didn't want to consider having to include those escalators. And James Jones says, but we offered max of 3 or 4 years. Yet another reporter, I don't remember who the reporter was, but says they talked to the other side of Ayton's side and said the Suns never offered 3 or 4 years, but we didn't want that anyway. So basically there was no negotiation. Sarver's team took a hard line and it fell apart. Now I wonder, we'll talk in a couple of seconds about whether Sarver will still be around for the next negotiations that happen next summer. But if he comes in again with a 3 or 4 year max offer because another team can't offer more than that, then we may end up having to, I didn't want to leave, but I have to leave kind of situation. Now let's talk about Sean Marion real quick.
Can I add one thing there? You know, it just seems to me, just looking at the numbers, you know, offering a 3+1 to DeAndre would have favored DeAndre, not the Suns. So I just think that if it was a max for 3.1 max, 3+1 max, he would have. I think his agent would have taken that because he's gonna cash in. The cap is gonna take off. I mean that, you know, the pandemic's over, the crowds are back, the revenues are gonna go up, the cap's gonna go up. You know, so he could make a lot more money. You know, that it's why these guys are taking, you know, shorter term contracts. You know, because they want that they want that leverage of being a free agent sooner. So I don't know. You know, to me, it didn't make sense that, you know, if they offered that, I think DeAndre's camp would have taken that. So I tend to believe. Plus, history tells me to believe the other side. You know, I don't believe that they ever firmly offered him a 3+1 max.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And that's why I love the Bridges contract. You know, just getting these contracts over with, the sooner you do it, like the cap spike, I think 2024, 25. So it'll be like halfway through those contracts. So just got to knock them out right now.
Yeah, it seems to make sense to me. You know, again, I don't know. You know, I kept hearing the stuff about like the James Jones comments about the flexibility, you know, going forward type stuff, you know, 4 years down the road. I mean, why do you draft DeAndre Ayton number 1 if you're not considering him part of your core,
your long-term core, especially what I find funny about that whole thing is if I'm going to try to be a hardline GM after you were taken number 1 overall, and I want to say, DeAndre, this is what it's going to take for me to give you a 5-year max. What would I have said that would be in 2 years ago that would have been so out of the realm? Ayton would just be like, oh, what the hell? What would I have said? I would have said, carry us to a finals by your 3rd year. Then you'll get the max. That would be the most outlandish thing you could say to tell him that he has to do to earn his 5-year max. Fine. Be the anchor. Be the defensive anchor that carries us to the finals by the end of year 3, and we'll talk about a max. And that's exactly what he did do. I'm not saying the Suns told him that, but I'm saying that would be the most outlandish thing they could have told him. And his camp would have been, oh, F you. That's ridiculous. And yet here he did it, and he still can't get the max. So I don't know. To me, the most valuable players you can have, the ones who should make money, would be profiled as how about a 22-year-old who's defensively carried you to the finals against a series of MVP caliber players and actually was allowed you not to have to double team MVP caliber 7-footers for 4 straight rounds or 3 out of 4 rounds, and also can play defense against a small team.
And don't forget, he outplayed, you might even say at times dominated, the MVP of the league.
Yes. And he set records for efficiency and double doubles and all that, all these things that he had the most 20-10 games of a guy his age. He had the most 15-10 straight from any playoffs for any age. Big man on the other. I mean, it's incredible what he did. And
let me add one other point to that. They have sold since James Jones got there, and I think fairly, they have sold the idea that they are really dedicated to player development, that's a big part of their culture and their program. And you have the number 1 pick. Mark Bryant works with that guy constantly. I don't know if his work ethic was great at the beginning, but clearly last year he worked hard to get better. And has improved in that respect. And Mark Bryant's a good big man coach and a tough guy and a smart guy. So you spend all of that effort in developing the guy, and he plays at that level in the playoffs against an MVP and others, and then you're not going to pay him. I mean, that's the thing that gets around the league. It's like, oh, you did him dirty. I'm sorry.
He did everything you said he needed to do.
Yeah, exactly. Your messaging has been, hey, he's young, stick with him. When he, the knucklehead thing with the whatever the drug was that he took that cost him 25 games.
It was a diuretic.
Boy, I would argue if he's there for those 25 games, they're in the playoffs in that team. They're at least, they're at the bottom, on the cusp at the very least, maybe a playoff team. So I don't know. It never made sense to me that, they would ask him to do that. They develop the guy, they take him number 1, and then they're not willing to pay when the time comes.
Yeah. And the most telling thing to me is like other executives and just media members around the league are like, why are you not paying this guy? Like, it's pretty much the consensus, like, feeling whereas like in the past with Suns situations, usually it's like, are we just being homers and like, we just want to pay our guy? But no, this is like league wide. Everyone's questioning, like, why are you not paying him? So it's very interesting. I think there's, I don't want to read too much into it, but it seems like there's something we don't know that James has up his sleeve. Like, I just don't get it on the surface, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah. So let me go to Marion.
Real quickly, David. It reminds me a little bit of the Stoudemire situation as well,
Okay.
where they didn't want to give him the max. They didn't want to guarantee all of the years of a max contract.
10.
Yeah, because of his injury history, and as it turned out, that was not necessarily a bad move because he did break down. I would argue that had somebody other than Mike D'Antoni been coaching him the next year or two, he wouldn't have broken down. They wouldn't have played him 37, 38 minutes a game. And if they had managed his minutes better, I think he would have held up. And the Suns had a much better training staff, as you know, at that time to deal with all of that. But, at least in that case, there was some reason, some rationale for that decision not to give him all not to offer him all the years. But in DeAndre's case, I mean, the guy's he's been healthy. He is healthy. He's young.
Well, what's funny is
nothing but upside.
Yeah, what's funny is Amin Al Hassan, who is a very famous Suns hater at this point.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
On Twitter. He used to work for the Suns. He worked for the Suns during that year under Steve Kerr and actually the change in regime, who was trying to give. Actually, no, Steve Kerr was still there when they decided not to guarantee all the years for an Amari offer. He left right in the middle of it, but basically he was part of that. And
that was
to this day,
Kerr and Griff both left because Robert didn't want to give pay raises to the basketball operations and other people. Kerr had asked, they said Kerr wanted a big raise. Kerr was trying to get raises for his people after they had just been to the Western Conference Finals, and Robert wouldn't give them, wouldn't approve the raises. So that's the reason that those guys left, and that was the infamous Lon Babby and
era.
The basketball savant Lance Blanks came in.
Oh man! All right. Well, hey, we're already talking about negative stuff. Let's not talk about Lance Blanks but I do want to point out that the only thing really defends the Suns for, the only thing he defends the Suns for is he says that was a good offer for Amari to only guarantee $60 million. He felt strongly that the Suns were in the right, not offering a fully guaranteed 100. Amin El Hassan.
Yeah,
the only thing he defends the Suns.
And I wrote that at the time that was one Robert got right. I think because he did break down, which is what they were concerned about.
Yeah. And replacing with Hedo Turkoglu and Hakeem Warwick, it's another story, but I agree.
Oh yeah. Oh my God. Yeah.
Hedo Turkoglu. I remember Amin was still there, and he says, it was pretty wild sitting in the free agent room with Robert Sarver, and Sarver is ignoring all of his front office staff sitting around the conference table because he has Hakeem Warwick's agent on one line and Gambo on the other line, taking advice from those guys on whether what he should do about signing Hakeem Warwick.
Oh, that's amazing.
Ignoring his guys around the table.
Yeah. Well, again, just quickly to revisit the Joe Johnson thing, everybody in his basketball operations at that time was telling him to sign Joe and give him the money, and he didn't do it. So, he's never been one to necessarily listen to his basketball people.
All right. Speaking of Robert Sarver, we'd be remiss. I'm going to move on now to. We'd be remiss if we don't discuss what broke yesterday. What news broke yesterday?
Wait, is there an elephant in this room?
There's a big one. We've been ignoring it.
The big elephant in the room. Yeah.
We get this tweet from I forget who tweeted it out, but basically saying there's a big story coming next week, and reinforced by other people who are aware of this story coming. Excuse me, that Robert Sarver is going to be basically put on a pike next week by ESPN with accusations of everything you can accuse an owner of to get him out. Basically, it's not good enough just to be a sexual harasser because Mark Cuban's whole front office stayed in place. It's not good enough to be just a racist because other owners have stayed in place because of that. But if you put Jordan Schultz, thank you, Sunder Stunks. But if you put them both together, that might be enough to move a guy out of his ownership position, his managing partner position. Now, Robert Sarver does not own the Suns. He has about 100 other investors, and he owns the majority stake, which is still, is it even 30%? I don't even know if it's that much, but he himself just has the majority percentage out of the 100 or so people who are invested in the team, some of which own more than others, obviously. But basically, someone's putting together a hit piece, and I'm going to say hit piece because even if it's 100% factual, putting it all into one article is kind of like, wow, let's go. 50 up to 50 employees were interviewed for this, supposedly. And at least some of them are accusing Robert of these various things. Robert's camp immediately put out a scathing reply, basically claiming everything is a lie and that they have documentary proof that everything is a lie that this guy from ESPN is going to print. So I wanted to also talk to Bob about this. You've been around Robert Sarver for his entire ownership. Have you heard of or been exposed to, and you don't work for any of the outlets right now, so you don't have to worry about losing any of your access to the Suns, but Bob, are you aware of anything that might say that this article could have some truth to it?
I'm not going to go into any details because obviously I never reported anything like that. I never reported anything like that because I never was able to substantiate anything like that. But I have heard of at least one incident where he used a racial epithet. And I had heard of at least one sexual harassment report. I thought it was interesting. And by the way, I never heard that again. I heard it, I heard both of those things independently and never heard another incident on either type of behavior. But I thought it was interesting in his statement. He was very adamant about not using that sort of language. He was very adamant about saying that he has never discriminated on race or gender. He did not deny any sexual harassment. I thought that was interesting that he never
released.
He did not pinpoint that particular thing. I also thought it was interesting that they made sure to throw the language in there about malicious intent. Like we're going to sue you for libel if this is printed. I really I work at ASU in the Cronkite School, and just as a journalist and a journalism instructor, I am really bothered by the idea that somebody would report that somebody else is going to report a blockbuster story. I mean, that is really, if I was the guy at
questioning Jordan
working on this story, man, I would be ticked off. I'd punch that guy in the face if I saw him, Jordan Schultz. I mean, I think that is, I don't know. It's just, maybe it's just, maybe that's the nature of modern media and social media and stuff, but he's going on doing interviews about what he hears is in the story. I mean, come on,
it's ridiculous.
If you want to tweet out that, hey, I'm hearing that ESPN is about to dump a blockbuster on the NBA and the Phoenix Suns and leave it at that, I think I'm okay with that. But you're basically, you're stealing the thunder. You're undermining the guy's hard work and reporting, and drawing the attention to yourself for just knowing that he's working on this story.
Jordan Schultz has been drawing attention to himself for years, trying to break news, and he's right about 20% of the time. I agree. I'm sure he has sources, but that doesn't mean they're going to end up being right. That's all.
What if that story is never published? What liability does he have for exposing Robert Sarver and the Suns to that kind of I'll say firestorm? That's not the word I have. I would rather use. But what happens if that story is never published? Is that guy going to be able to defend that in court? I don't know. I mean, that's I'd be a little concerned if that story doesn't show up in print at some point.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. You've got one side who probably feels like, look, man, this is just a hit piece. It has no merit. And then you've got the other side going, well, when there's smoke, there's probably something behind it. But look, Mark Cuban is still in place, and his entire organization was investigated multiple times for sexual harassment. It took egregious evidence, firsthand evidence, for Donald Sterling to be ushered out. There's almost zero. Look, I'm just going to go on record right now. Of course, why am I going on record? I don't know jack shit. I don't know anything. But I think there's probably a 99.9% chance Robert Sarver will brush this off, and he's going to continue as the owner. Zona, we've been talking and not letting you get a word in. So what do you have a take on this that doesn't put you in danger?
No, it's fascinating stuff. And I agree. There has to be something that's like damning that could actually move the needle to get him to, get replaced basically. So I'm very interested to see what that story holds. And if it's just a bunch of interviews and hearsay, then I don't think anything is going to happen, but obviously it's tough to project. I just keep going back to that Marcin Gortat quote. I don't know if you guys remember the brothel on wheels when he was talking about the Suns. So
yeah.
I wonder if Bob brought up the point that he never mentioned anything about sexual harassment. So that's the part that I think could be interesting. That something to monitor. But yeah, just that whole like tweet and everything just felt kind of fake. And then all like the backlash coming from like reporters and made it very real, very fast. So I agree that him leaking out the story of a story is very odd and just attention seeking, but that's just modern journalism. So it's sad to see.
Yeah. And just real quickly, you talked briefly about the structure of the ownership. I don't know exactly what Robert's percentage is. I was told a couple years ago when I was at the Athletic, somebody had told me that his minority partners actually had more of the managing partnership. That's how it works. There's a small group of owners or managing partners, and then there's a whole lot of other investors. They don't have any say in the management of the team. It's just those people in that managing partnership. Okay. And I was told that there was at least one of them that owned as much or more of that managing partnership as Sarver. But the way the partnership is constructed, the way it was, the agreement was built, Robert can own like 1%, and it doesn't matter. As long as he's part of that group, he is the guy that manages the partnership.
Yeah, it's basically the board of directors of the owner. So it's like
they
all signed on. All the other investors signed on to proxy all of their power over to this partnership group, of which Sarver is one of 3 or 4. I think there's 3, maybe.
I think there's at least 4. I think there's
4?
At least 4. Okay. Yeah.
And those guys vote as to who is the day-to-day operations person. So it's possible that those guys could.
No, that the way the partnership is constructed, they don't vote. Robert is the managing partner, no matter what his percentage of the managing partnership is, and no matter what everybody else's percentage of the managing partnership is. As long as that partnership exists,
as long as
he's the guy calling the shots. So I mean, I don't know what the particulars are beyond that. So I don't know whether they could just buy Robert out if the NBA decided to, because one of his partners has the money to buy him out. I can promise you that. He's worth $3.5 billion, according to Forbes. So
they could buy him out if they wanted to.
I think so, but you never know. The partnership may not be constructed that way. It may be that it has to be dissolved and everything sold, and maybe they'll want to sell the whole thing. I don't know. Wow. A lot of things to be answered, but that first we got to find out whether any of that is reported, and then whether any of it is substantiated to the degree where the NBA is going to take action.
Hey, do we know Coach Fallen Founder asked?
Probably right. That's a long shot.
Yeah, Coach Fallen Founder asked, did Steve Kerr have to sell his portion? I don't know.
I'm sure he did. Yeah,
I think he had to.
Yeah,
right? When he
go
took
to work
a job
for another
there?
team, he had to. But I think he had done that anyway.
Okay.
And that's an example of somebody. He was not part of the managing partnership. He was just an investor. I'm pretty sure Larry Fitzgerald is the same way. He just owns a piece. Like Danny Manning owned a piece of Diamondbacks back in the day. He had an investment in the team, but he wasn't part of the managing partnership.
Right. There were a lot of small investors like that.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. We've kept you an hour so far, Bob. And we've talked about a lot of different things. Thank you so much for staying over. I had originally told you half an hour, but this is just so fun to talk about. I appreciate you staying for this. Any other final comments or thoughts you wanted to share before we let you back to your Saturday?
Yeah, no, I will continue to watch from afar and enjoy the drama.
That's right. Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to go it's late, but we're going to go into our halftime. I'm going to do our Manscaped ad, which I don't need Bob to stay and listen to if he doesn't want to.
I don't need that.
And then we are Zona on the other side of that minute. Zona and I are going to come back, and the Ballers brought up a couple of things they want us to talk about today. We'll get to that, and then we'll preview the upcoming games, and we'll try to get you out of here within the next 15 minutes or so, folks. So stay around while I read the ad. Bob, thank you so much. You can head out anytime you want to head out.
Have a good one.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bob.
All right, folks. Bob, that was a great thing. Sorry you didn't get much chance to talk Zona, but I didn't realize
No, that was great
he
stuff.
talks well.
Yeah.
We needed that input. Okay, so I'll give you a minute to get a drink, everybody, but please stay on while I read this ad. Attention ballers, basketball is back. Ben Simmons has 76 problems this season, but you can have none with our friends at Manscaped. Join the 2 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped to keep their front and backcourt polished all year long. Trim with their new Lawnmower 4.0, which is included in the Performance Package 4.0, and watch the hair fade away. If you go to manscaped.com, use our promo code FlamingBallers, and you can get 20% off plus free shipping. That's Flaming Ballers, 20% off plus free shipping. It's not raining threes, it's drizzling pubes. Yes, that was in the read. I think that's cute. Get 20% off with the free shipping with the code Flaming Ballers. You see it right on the screen. Flaming Ballers, all one word, at manscaped.com. And you can have a great time mowing your lawn as the show shows you. Man, I just lost my momentum there at the very end. Zona, you're gonna have to read one of these one time.
Oh man, I'll need to practice, but we'll see how it goes.
I don't practice, as you all can tell. All right, so it is a great product, though, folks. You need to use it so we can keep our sponsor. Definitely, this is a tenuous relationship, as you guys know. We'll see what happens at the end of the month. But Manscaped is a good sponsor of ours, and we appreciate their contributions to our show. So thank you very much. Let's move on to the third quarter baller talk. There were a couple of questions I noticed in the chat that this is a good time for us to bring up, Zona. And Zona, you've been saving your voice this entire show. Thank you so much for deferring to Bob Young. I appreciate that. And of course, always deferring to me because I can't stop talking. K to the B had a question early in the show. The Houston Rockets are really rebuilding. They're enjoying all their rookies. They have 4 first-round picks on that team. They all look really good. But they're going to win maybe 20 games this year. And probably for the next 3 or 4 years, they're going to maybe win in the 20s. Yep. Christian Wood might be somebody who should move on from that team. Christian Wood is a guy who's basically mid-career now. He can be helpful for a good team. Do you think the Suns should, and by the way, Christian Wood makes only about $10, $12 million a year. Do you think the Suns should trade for Christian Wood?
I'd be for it. I think, especially when you look at the West, I think there's a lot of teams that could use him. So if you're taking him away from, say the Warriors want to go after him, or like the Blazers or a team like that, it helps just, addition by not letting another team at him. But I also think he's a great fit and someone that could, it kind of puts JaVale back in, on the third string, but he'd be a great backup center and someone that could even play alongside Ayton in bigger lineups. So I'd be for it for the right price. Obviously, you don't want to give up a ton for him, but yeah.
So do you think a Christian Wood would be a good next to Ayton guy? Or, okay, I got to correct myself. It was a 3-year, $41 million deal that he signed with the Rockets, which means he makes about 15, 16 million a year, something like that, 15 a year. Would you put DA and Wood next to each other, or would you replace DA with Wood?
I wouldn't replace him with. I think you'd play him in spurts with Ayton against certain teams, and he'd probably be a backup 5. Play some 4 as well, but he'd be kind of like what you'd want Thad Young to be if you traded for him. To me, I would not replace him with Ayton though.
Yeah, Christian Wood is mostly, though. I mean, he does have stretch qualities. Obviously, he can put threes up. But from what I've seen, he's really a 5 more than a 4. So I'm curious how he would fit next to Ayton. But you know what? Talent is talent. And the dude's only 25 years old. He could be really good. I would definitely acquire him if I'm not giving up Ayton. But if it's one of those move on from Ayton because we're not going to sign him, I would not focus on Christian Wood as an Ayton replacement for sure. I don't know. I would definitely take him if he's being given away.
Trade for him.
You think the Warriors are?
I just have a weird feeling. I feel like it's such a good fit too because they need a big like that. So, and they have the pieces.
That'd be super interesting. So would you trade Wiseman?
I'm sure they'd probably have to trade one of their rookies or Wiseman, like Moses Moody or Kuminga or Wiseman. One of those three would probably have to go.
Moses. Yeah. Yeah, interesting. So the Warriors getting Wood would be good for them, bad for the Suns.
Yep.
You know what? We didn't talk about this earlier. Let's actually do that really quick. Who has impressed you this first week of games, Zona, on other teams besides the Suns? Who's impressed you?
The Knicks have looked pretty good. I was probably a little bit too low on them. Like I thought they'd be better, but it's obviously 2 games, and they had that crazy, was it triple overtime or double overtime game against the Celtics on opening night, and yeah, so they've looked good. But the Heat looked really good in their opener. That team, to me, like my hottest take is I think they could easily win a championship with the way they're constructed. Like it wouldn't shock me at all. I love that team. So, but yeah, those are the 2 teams out east that stand out to me. The Warriors have looked better than I thought, and they're still missing a couple key pieces. So, yeah, I think Golden State, to me, like I still don't buy them as like a legit title contender, but they've looked good.
Yeah, I'm really I'm in the unknown phase on Golden State. There are some people who are sold. Anybody with Steph Curry is
you need to see
gonna
Clay
play.
come back first before saying that.
Yeah, I've got to see what does Clay look like. If he looks like JJ Redick or Kyle Korver, where he's great shooter but not really great on defense, then I don't think their ceiling is much higher than it is right now.
Yeah.
But if he plays like the old Klay Thompson, which is going to be very difficult, but if he does, then obviously they're a threat. But I just don't think they're a shoe-in. I don't think the Lakers are a shoe-in. The team that I really do think is going to be very good this year is the Nuggets. I even without Jamal Murray, and then suddenly when they get Jamal Murray back around playoff time, they're going to be a very tough out.
Yeah.
Any other teams? How about teams that disappointed you so far?
I was going to shout out the Jazz as well. I mean, they're just looking like their typical self as far as positives.
The Jazz and the Suns are just machines, right?
Yeah,
at this point,
they're going to buzzsaw through I think those are the top 2 seeds out west, honestly. Denver is a good point as well. Teams that have disappointed, I would say Boston. They're off to an 0-2 start, and they lost that game against the Knicks. And the Pelicans look pretty bad, and Zion's hurt. So that's a team that I think could enter tank mode if Zion's not back anytime soon. So just something to look out west.
Yeah, absolutely. Zion, not coming back anytime soon. No timetable for his return. So we'll see what happens there. I've always been, and I hate doing this, so I haven't voiced it. No, I'm not going to voice it. I hope Zion stays healthy his whole career. I really do. I hope he gets to the point where he gets healthy and stays healthy. Let's see. LaMelo Ball. I'm just going to say Ted Lubin, even though his name is backwards on our feed. LaMelo Ball has looked really good. Have you seen anything on the Hornets so far?
Yeah, they're a fun team. LaMelo is great. Like just watching him play, like they've always been one of my favorite league pass teams. Like especially last year, and just their commentators are great too. So they make like the most boring plays exciting. So I recommend watching them.
Raptors. I guess the Raptors had a bad game and then a good game, so we don't really know about them.
Yeah, and Siakam's out there too. So
what'd you say?
And Siakam's out right now too, so that's could be interesting.
That could be interesting. Okay, then the other question, so says Jay asked in the chat, is have we done the Ish Wainwright segment yet? The Suns, let's just recap. The Suns did sign Ish Wainwright to their other two-way deal. That was kind of funny. Zona, you made some comments on Twitter. So why don't you give us the Ish Wainwright story?
Yeah, so very James Jones-like to sign a 27-year-old to a two-way, especially when your other one is a 25-year-old. I think I don't have the information to pull this up, but that has to be the oldest combination of two-way contracts since they started two ways by a landslide. So yeah, Wainwright's been kind of bouncing around after leaving Baylor. Could follow like that PJ Tucker role, which I've seen kind of thrown around a lot. Really athletic, good defender, can dribble a little bit, but someone that's not really going to play for the Suns, like unless there's like an emergency situation. Same with Hutchison. So I think they're just looking for another campaign type reclamation project, which is it's a long shot, but I'm happy they're at least using the contracts, because obviously they had those 2 spots open for a while, and the 15th spot was open on their roster as well. So this is just kind of a way to like fill that spot cheaply. I saw you tweeted that. It's just it's an interesting strategy. I mean, if you don't want to use that 15th spot, just use a couple 2-ways and see what you have.
Dang, stat me.
We haven't used that for a while. I'm going to go into a little bit of detail. I think the nature of the 2-way has totally changed partly because of the pandemic. Originally, the 2-way contract was meant to be somebody who could barely get a cup of coffee at the NBA level, but spent most of the year in the G League. And it was an enhancement to say, hey, as an NBA franchise, I have the sole rights to this guy, and I'm going to give him some time up with the NBA team. But you had a very limited number of games, like back when Mike James was on a 2-way contract. I don't know if you remember Mike James as the starting point guard for the Suns for about 20 games at the beginning of the year. Back then, 2-way contracts, you could not spend more than 45 days with the NBA team, whether you're on the active roster or not, whether you're starting or not, playing or not, whatever. I think the max number of games was 30. I think the max number of days was 45. 45 literal days, and that included travel days. So if you were on a plane for a day coming from your G League team to the Suns, that counts as one of your 45 days. That was back then. And back then, it was meant for young guys to be extras beyond your 15-man roster that could one day develop into players. Like Jared Harper was a good example. He was a 22-year-old rookie, signed a 2-way contract, spent most of the time in the G League, got a cup of coffee with the Suns. Great. These days, the 2-way is a completely different deal. Today's 2-way contract is you can play up to 50 games with the NBA team, 50 games out of 82. You can be in 50 games. You can be with the big league team an unlimited number of days, and you don't even have to really show up in the G League. It's just that it's an extra contract. It's basically going beyond the 15-man roster into 16 and 17 and allowing you to have basically extra guys for depth in case you have a run of COVID. So it was totally changed and it's a half contract now. It used to be 2-way contract was maybe $50,000, $75,000 that they would get, because they would get paid basically based on the days as a per diem, the days they're in the NBA, and the days they could be in the NBA were limited. Now you can make $250,000 on a 2-way contract because the number of days you're allowed to be with the NBA team. So it's actually worth it to sign as a 16th, 17th man basically on a roster. And you're never going to, that level of player is never going to be active for 50 games anyway. In fact, last year, Jalen Smith got into 20. That's an example of a guy who's out of the rotation, barely plays. So basically you've got a longer roster, and the GM and the owner can get those for cheap, because the minimum contract for a for a rookie in the league on a guaranteed contract is almost $900,000. You only have to pay a 2-way $250,000. So that's why they're doing this. The Suns are basically just adding depth, and I think Zona, you're right that they're going for that lightning in a bottle campaign this past year. PJ Tucker 10 years ago, it might work, and maybe that guy will find a niche, and it might work, and he might stay, and he might make a career out of it. But if he doesn't, the Suns are not out $1 million; they're only out $250,000.
Yep. And the reason I'm fine with it, and I think it's a smart move, is just obviously they don't have a G League team. So there's no point of adding like a young guy that's going to need G League reps. Both their guys on 2-ways don't need to be in the G League. So they're just kind of there, break glass if there's an emergency type guys, if there's a COVID like protocols going on or injuries, stuff like that. It's just good to have as insurance. Obviously you want to fill that 15th spot. If they go the whole season without doing that, then that's not a good look, especially for a playoff team and a title contender. So I think it makes sense to add these older guys while you don't have a G League.
Oh, yeah. So Malachi in the chat brings up, sorry to harken back to the last segment. The Wolves and Kings might surpass the Mavs. That's another team I'm disappointed in so far is the Mavericks. I'm hoping for their sake, just not that they'll beat the Suns ever because they can't. But definitely, I mean, even when Luka was at, and his Mavs were, hey, we're a threat, they still lost to the Suns every time. So, but I'm not a fan of Jason Kidd as a coach, or as a person. So definitely I'm okay with those guys failing a little bit. And because it's Luka's team, I'm even more okay. But yeah, the Mavs have looked disappointing so far. One last question we'll take from the ballers is where did it go? What are the Kings going to do with Bagley? What do you think? Should the Suns be open to acquiring Marvin Bagley? What do you think that situation?
The Kings are handling it very Kings-like. That's all I'll say on their end. But should the Suns take a swing on him? Like, I mean, it just depends on the price. Like, I wouldn't mind it just because if it's a pure upside swing. But obviously, like, there could be some chemistry issues if he wants to play. I think he's probably going to end up somewhere like on a bad team like OKC or like someone that has like the resources to kind of give him minutes and just take that swing. But yeah, for any team that's just looking for, taking a home run swing with very little risk, I would do it. But yeah, I don't know. The Kings very, very much, botched that draft, and we're kind of seeing that play out in slow motion. It's been happening for a while. Like, after the first year, the injuries and the DNPs and just like the inconsistent energy with him. So yeah, I'm not surprised it's turned out this way at all, especially with how his family has been very involved.
Hey, Thomas Herndon is potentially correcting me here. I'd have to look it up. It might be $462K for a two-way. I have to look it up. But either way, it's half of what you'd have to pay the back end of your roster, even with the least amount of experience. So we'll look it up. Thank you, Thomas. Okay, so yeah, I don't know. I don't know what position Bagley plays because I'm a fan of defense, and if Bagley can't play defense in the paint or on the perimeter, then okay.
Yeah, I think he has to play the five
need?
pretty much. Like,
Yeah.
which I don't know if he's big enough for that. So small ball five is probably the best way to use him, but can he actually do that? So that's interesting.
There's a case where maybe the Warriors can make something of him, but you know what? They've already got Wiseman, so why would they even try? Okay, let's move to our final segment, and thank you all for being patient. We are over an hour 17 into this show, but I thought we had some really, really good talk early in the show. Let's go into I showed the wrong one. Coach Fallen Founder says we should have gotten Admiral Schofield just because of the name. Okay, sure. But I'm not going to worry about two ways too much. Let's preview the next two games on the schedule. Before we do this live show again, the Suns will have played two more games. Tonight, they play against Portland. And then on Wednesday, they play the Kangs. And that's it for the next week. So they played, basically, they'll start the season three games in 4 days, and then one game in like a week. So it's kind of weird. But what do you think is going to happen tonight against Portland, Zona?
Well, this is a great team to play if you want to build up your confidence offensively because they can't guard anyone. But at the same time, it's going to be a test for your defense because, they could obviously score with the best of them. So expect it to be, a high scoring game, very fast paced. And the Suns coming off the second of a back-to-back will be interesting too, just to see how their guys are handling the conditioning and all that. But I think Phoenix should be able to pull it out. But you also don't want to sleep on Portland because they lost their home opener against the Kings, I believe. So
against the Kings, yes.
Yeah. So, and that's obviously the next team they play. So yeah, both these teams that they're scheduled to play are going to want to get up and down, try to outscore you.
Yeah. What's interesting is the Suns, one of the positives of being a really good team is you're on national TV and they book those national TV games right at the beginning of the first week of the season. And so the Suns get 3 games in 4 nights, all on national TV, although tonight's NBA TV. First 2 games were ESPN.
Yep.
Whereas Portland is only playing once in this span. So Portland has actually had 2 full days off. They played Wednesday night. They have Thursday and Friday off. They play again tonight. So they'll be fully rested and hurting from losing to the Kings at home. And now they've got the Suns at home. They're going to be really focused and they're going to really try to win. So the Suns are going to have to come in ready to play hard. And it's the second night of a back-to-back, third game in 4 days to start the season after not playing for 2 months. I worry that the Suns are going to lose. They're going to run out of gas in the second half. So I don't know what's going to happen tonight. I think I'm going to tentatively pick a loss for tonight. I think the Suns are going to have a tough time winning because Portland's going to be so desperate to win. Dame, all he has to do is go off. If Dame misses all his shots, that's a different story. But I feel like Dame's going to be on. I feel like CJ McCollum's going to be on. I feel like Yusuf Nurkic is going to play well. He's healthy at this point. I think they're a pretty good team. I think they're going to battle the Lakers for playoff seeding just like they did last year. Basically playoff seeding. And we'll see what happens. But I feel like this is a tough game for the Suns to win. If the Suns do win, they're fully back. They're fully back in form. Last year's Suns would have won this. But I'm worried about if they're fully into this season yet. That's my concern.
Yeah, it's going to be a tough game. And I think the bench is the key, right? Because they didn't play a ton against the Lakers. So I think if they can get good minutes out of their bench and maybe ride them a little bit longer than usual, and keep them in the game, then the starters will have a chance to at least close it out or, have a chance going in the fourth quarter. So, but yeah, it'll be a tough game for sure.
Thomas Hernan says, Portland will be a good game to play Frank and Jalen. Yeah, I'm just worried about the circumstances. Are the Suns down 20 or are they up 20? That's my question. It could be either after what happened in Denver and then LA. So I'm not really sure. So we'll see what happens tonight. And then against the Kings, the Suns will have had finally a little bit of a rest. If they did lose, I'm one of those guys who says if you lose one, you're going to win one. If they lose tonight, like I predict against the Blazers, I think they'll win easily against the Kings next Wednesday. Either way, I think they beat the Kings Wednesday. I'm just going to say it. I think they beat the Kings Wednesday regardless, but I think they'll beat them even more certainly if they lose tonight. What do you think, Zona?
I think they win both games. I think the Portland one's obviously the tougher one, and it could be like a 50-50 type game just because of the circumstances. But, the Kings shouldn't be a problem. They can't defend anyone, but Fox looks really good, and they do have some good guards too, and Harrison Barnes is solid. So, they have a good team. I think they're kind of a little bit underrated. I think they have a legit chance at making the play-in this year, as a 9 or 10 seed. So them and the T-Wolves are a couple of teams that should be more competitive this year.
Yeah, I'm wondering about the T-Wolves, but you know what? We get fooled by them the first 2 weeks of every season. So we'll see. I want to see what they look like in December.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's our preview of the week. You think they're going to go 2-0. I think they're going to go 1-1. We'll have a midweek podcast coming up during the week. What I want to close out today's show with is a reminder, folks, to pick up the podcast feed. If you watch on YouTube, we love you. Thank you so much. But we have extra shows during the week. And I want you to go find it on your podcast feed and subscribe because those are really good interviews with national folks. I'll try to get somebody to talk about the Sarver thing or some other big news thing for next week. So I'm going to play this video real quick. It's a very short video to show you how to find our feed. For those watching this episode on YouTube, I've got some news for you. You're only getting half the story. The Solar Panel Podcast delivers you an additional special episode every Wednesday with a national personality from places like The Ringer, The Athletic, Bleacher Report, Sports Illustrated, ESPN, NBA.com, and everyone else. You'll hear what the non-locals think about the Suns and the NBA in general. It's a new feed, though. You've got to click some buttons. Forget the old one. Get the new one. Go to your favorite pod app, search for Solar Panel Podcast with the orange logo. While you're there, subscribe, rate, and review. And if you leave me a 5-star review, I'll give you props on the air. All right, and I am posting the links in the chat here. So while we're wrapping up and saying our goodbyes, folks can click those links and go to the podcast feed. We appreciate you. Like I said, these are great midweek episodes that you guys are not going to want to miss. Zona, thank you for coming on today. Tell us, do you have any closing thoughts before you tell us what you're promoting these days?
Just don't panic early in the season. Stuff happens. We were 8-8 last year, so I saw a lot of overreactions after the Denver game, and even if they lose tonight, the world is not ending. The sky's not falling. It's not a big deal. But yeah, you can find me on Twitter at @ZonaHoops_, and my work at Bright Side of the Sun and ZonaHoops.com.
Yeah, zonahoops.com is a great website. You cover a lot of draft related stuff. You cover a lot of league wide stuff as well as Suns coverage too.
Mhm.
And some of the best Suns Twitter personalities, like Cody Hunt and not Ryan McDonough and guys like that, actually write articles in zonahoops.com. So it's a really great resource there. So definitely check out Zona's website. And obviously brightsideofthesun.com is where you can find both of us as regular writers, as well as a bunch of other guys. So please follow us on the websites, pick up the podcast feed, and obviously stay here for the YouTube. We really appreciate y'all. Thank you so much. You can find me at Dave King NBA. My Twitter handle is right here. So is Zona's, and on Twitter. And obviously our works at brightsideofthesun.com. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a great Saturday. We'll talk to you again very